Hello everyone, this is Andres Restart, and today we are talking about what appears to be Nintendo teasing something very epic in Donkey Kong Bananza. Now, I'm going into this recording not planning on it being a giant video. I think this is going to be more of a simple discussion today, but there is something going on here that I don't think a lot of people are pointing out that is kind of crazy and could have some very interesting implications for Donkey Kong Bananza and how it will play. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out I am still aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So here is a screenshot that came out last night, and I actually think there are some really cool things going on here. A lot of people have noted that it just seems like a grand, epic image, and it is. But it's showing from another angle something we've already seen of the lagoon world in Bananza. And that's this area with this giant great ape that's sitting on some sort of throne with all of these cargo containers behind him. But from this vantage point, there are things we are seeing that I think are telling us even more about this game. So I'll just tell you the first big discovery I noticed with this latest screenshot here. And that's that what we're looking at is actually a giant cargo ship. Let me show you how a cargo ship looks. This is a cargo ship. They hold cargo containers. And as you see here in the front, they'll have these two giant anchor spots. They'll have the different wheels to bring in all the chains or what have you to reel in the anchors. So let's take a look at what's going on here at the front. We see these two little wheel spots where there would be some sort of rope or something to hold an anchor, and what do we see here at the front? Two holes, very much like a container ship that has two holes for two giant anchors. But then as we look through at an angle, we can kind of tell that this would be the front of the ship, and there are even some additional holes here. We see a lot of rust here as well, even further down. And so what we're seeing here is a giant, old and battered cargo container ship. This is new information, and I think it could have some pretty significant implications here. You might be thinking, oh well, okay, that's cool, but it just looks cool. It doesn't mean anything else beyond just, okay, that's just how the environment looks. But I'm going to argue otherwise. So let's consider something. In Bananza, there are different types of surfaces and terrain. Some surfaces are tougher than others. Some surfaces Donkey Kong can climb, others he cannot. But a big, let's say, criticism that people have had about Bananza so far is it looks like you can just kind of break through and bust through everything, and this might take away from the level design. If there isn't really much limitation in terms of where you can go, then you can just blitz through to the end of a level. But we have heard rumors that there is more to Donkey Kong Bananza than what we've seen so far. And I do think that there are going to be sections in Bananza where Donkey Kong will not be all-powerful. In fact, we've already seen some areas. We've seen this side-scrolling section from the trailer that reminds us of prior Donkey Kong Country games. We've also seen this level from the treehouse, which is very much like these alternative levels we've seen in the 3D Mario games, where you go off into almost like a different realm and doing some sort of linear bite-sized platforming challenge. And in these sections, Donkey Kong will be challenged in other ways. But there also might be something even bigger going on. We've also seen the 3D map in the treehouse footage, and it shows that there are varying layers to the environment. It goes pretty deep. And we already know in this section that this is an area that is even deeper than what's explored in the treehouse. But this giant cargo ship, I wouldn't be surprised if you can get inside of it. But you probably can't just bust in. Now you might notice the front, there appears to be an opening there, and maybe we can get inside. We can even see one of the little monkeys right here. We likely will be able to speak to him, and he might be speaking to the idea of accessing the ship in some way. Maybe there's treasure down there of some kind. Something weird may be going on there. I really think it's a pretty safe expectation to think that when we go down here and we speak to this monkey who's looking at this giant cargo container ship, he's going to mention something about it. But to further support my point that this is a big, important section of the game, if you notice right here, this is actually one of the checkpoints. There's gold recovering it. When you break it, it opens up and it becomes a checkpoint in case you fall off or something like that. Why would they put a checkpoint here? Unless there is more to explore, or this is simply an important area. Now, of course, we see this giant Kong here. And we've gotten some close-up looks at this Kong. He is alive, he is awake, he's here looking at Donkey Kong from this pic. And we can also see up close that he has a headset on, which is very interesting. Why is he wearing a headset? Well, going back to this image here, we also have these giant pyramid speakers here. And something occurred to me about this image. This might be a record player. Looking closer over here, you can see that there's some sort of apparatus. So it may be the case that this area is meant to play music for whatever reason. And we know there are records in Donkey Kong Bananza from this Nintendo Today app clip where we see a record that comes out of the terrain. So we may be able to collect records, and perhaps we can bring them to this giant Kong here and we can play the music here. Maybe when we talk to him here, that's when this quest line opens up for the rest of the game, where you'll be collecting records and you can come back here and listen to the music. But I feel like there's gotta be more to this area than just listening to music. He seems kind of important from a level progression standpoint, not just a fun little extra standpoint. Maybe the music element is just a side detail to this overall character, and he's more so just an important character that might be some kind of guardian for this area. It's a possibility. I mean, we look over here, there's a ramp leading into this giant sort of collection of cargo containers, but this one spot almost looks like some kind of door you could bust through or open, especially because we have a ramp leading up to it. What's inside this area? We don't know. What's inside this ship? We don't know. Perhaps it leads to the big final boss for the Lagoon world. That, to me, makes a lot of sense, but it might not be as simple as you get in here and you fight a boss. This might even be almost kind of like a dungeon, maybe something Zelda-like, which may feel a little bit like a stretch, but let me point something else out here in this image. We see over here, there's some sort of ruin, and there's this giant circle with a triangle with some sort of spot in there, almost like a Triforce from Zelda. No, I'm not actually arguing that there is a huge Zelda reference in Donkey Kong Bananza. It's possible, but I think it's unlikely. I think a better bet would be that this might be some sort of symbol that is perhaps meant to resemble maybe these pyramid speakers here, for example. That's a more likely possibility. But you might not be able to just access this area easily. You might not be able to just bust through this door. You might need to find a way to open it up, and that might have to do with getting the right music playing so that can happen. But there's something else that I think is highly worthy of note from this image here. We can see all these void code plugs, and there's some sort of purple energy line connecting them to different areas, and I find this fascinating. Why? Because when we look at what they're all plugging up here, we see a lot of piping. This seems to be like a round-like structure. There's probably a lot of water that will come out of this, and there are several of them collected into one area. Now, we already know from the treehouse footage that part of our goal is to break up some of these void code plugs so water can come down and we can refill the environment a little bit. We're trying to open up the flow of water. But seeing all of these plugs here together in one close space, it definitely has me wondering what will happen once all this water is opened up. Maybe that's how we can access this big cargo container ship. Maybe all the water will allow the ship to start floating, for example, and that might open up some access. That's another possibility here. Clearly, it's a big important goal. And so ultimately what I think this image is suggesting to us is that there is some structure to the exploration of these worlds in Bananza. There are limitations. I do not think that Donkey Kong can just get into this cargo container ship. There are going to be limitations there, and you're going to have to open up these plugs probably to progress. But even once we get inside, there may be less destruction in there, and there may be a different kind of challenge. Similar to how we have different kinds of challenges already in Bananza, this may be another one that might be somewhat dungeon-like, somewhat like what we've seen in the Zelda games. Not exactly the same, this is Donkey Kong, not Zelda, but the point is, this is an area that we can't just get into. There are challenges we have to take care of that will grant us access to this area where there may be some more unique things to do once inside. But there's a little bit more I want to point out. So we've actually seen a few other screenshots that show us a few different angles. I had not seen this screenshot before, and here it is. It shows us a different vantage point of this environment. I thought it was just worth pointing out there. And we've also talked about this angle before as well. The big thing that I've talked about here is that there is like a boat here, but we also see this water flowing down. So yeah, clearly we're going to be filling up the waterfall. In fact, I think I can even see right here, it looks like water is already all the way up here. So I think that's very cool, because then we look back to the original image, the water is not even close to there, right? So as we continue opening up these water flows, the water is going to get higher, and that likely is going to open up some level of progression here. Now, coming back to the boat, I've talked about how this boat might be a reference to Gangplank Galleon from Donkey Kong Country, the final boss stage in the original Donkey Kong Country, a very important stage, also the first world in Donkey Kong Country 2, and a lot of people have argued otherwise, that it's just another metal boat, and maybe that's the case. I think it's hard to say for sure because, well, it's all old and mossy. I'm not sure. Regardless, there have been plenty of references having to do with King K. Rool and the Kremlings all throughout this game, so this would just be one more on top of that. It might not be that, could be something else, hard to say for sure. But another random thing I'm just going to point out here that I had just seen recently, here is Cranky Kong with Donkey Kong in a completely different area of the game. So we've seen Cranky Kong in the lagoon level, but not elsewhere. So this tells us we're going to see Cranky Kong throughout the game as we explore, which probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. From the prior Country games, Cranky Kong would be in the different worlds as well, so we're going to be able to run into him throughout the different worlds and interact with him and see all these different dialogues and get more clues as to what's going on with the story. So it's cool to know that we're going to be seeing him throughout the entire adventure and not just one time. But what do you all make of this image? Is there anything else about Donkey Kong Bananza that you've noticed that is epic or interesting? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.